question will go from now to 35, and at that point I will announce the substitutions. Okay, so our first question is affirmative action a good thing? And if you're not sure what affirmative action is, there is a definition.
So who wants to start?
Can I start by asking that we close the doors because the outside noise is kind of a good idea.
I got it. Thank you, Far East. Welcome.
Something here? Oh.
I'll start us off, guys. Go, Katie. No, I'm not starting. Oh.
Well, you talked first, so you guys can start.
Well, now you go first. So, affirmative actions. Everyone understand what it is. Everyone who's up here understands. I'm going to read to you guys in the audience because you might not know. An action or policy favoring those who tend to suffer from discrimination, especially in relation to employment or education. So we're supposed to be talking about education in general. So affirmative action would be like people who are either different races or different genders being discriminated against when it comes to education systems. Cool. So it seems like there's kind of two sides to this, that either it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Does anybody want to say why it's a bad thing? Or a good thing?
I think in an educational system situation, I know that my dad is very much against affirmative action, but I personally think it's kind of important because let's talk race first. I think with African Americans and how we treated them, not too long ago, it kind of left them in a position where it was kind of hard for them to build a life. So that's kind of why the idea of the black people being more poor kind of came around, because there's just a lot of them in poverty. But I don't think that's necessarily always their fault. A lot of the time it isn't, because when you're born and raised in a situation where you're in poverty and you don't get a really good educational system, because you're living in a really, really poor part of a town, and the high school there just doesn't really teach you that well, and you don't really know how to live. It's hard to get out of it. And so affirmative action in that situation, where colleges will accept people more because of sometimes weighing in on the idea that they're African American rather than white, I think it can be really helpful for trying to get them out of poverty, because it kind of gives them that extra boost. So we're trying to get rid of that idea that African Americans are equal poverty.
It's also interesting too, I was talking to Neelon earlier about it, and there's different levels, I guess, of affirmative action, and in certain situations it's a really, really good thing, and in certain situations it might be in order to meet a quota, people who aren't necessarily qualified for a certain college or whatever are put in that situation because of affirmative action, when they're not necessarily in a position to be the most successful. So that's another point, kind of. I think it's definitely an important thing too, to make sure we take that kind of thing into consideration, so it's not, you don't have all white colleges and that kind of thing. But it was an interesting point to talk about.
I think it should be based on whether you're qualified or not to go to a certain specific college, because I did a little bit of research on affirmative action before this, and I found that I kind of stood with the middle group when it came for that, and it was more that I agreed with the fact that yes, minorities should be accepted into colleges, and they shouldn't discriminate based on race at all. So they shouldn't just accept a minority because they are a minority. They should accept a minority because they are better, they are up to the same level as other people, and they aren't seen in a different way, and that skin color just really shouldn't matter based on education.
I think that's important, because there can be reverse discrimination where people are held to a higher standard, and it will demotivate people So say if someone's just a white person and they're trying to get into a college, but they can't, while someone that's a minority has the same, record as them, and they get into the college. It's the same thing for the workforce. It's not motivating people to try harder because now the minorities are set to a lower standard and they're given more privileges. So affirmative action is good for countries that are coming out of times like the civil rights movement. We needed it to build our country up and get us into the 21st century rolling where everyone's equal and we're looked at equal. But I think now, where we are, I don't think we need it. As long as there's no discrimination cases. I mean, there will always be those cases on the news that we'll have to look at and prosecute people for doing them, like the shootings, but other than that, we don't need it because everyone's equal and should be looked at as equals.
That's where I'm with George, is that the application process for colleges involving most requiring you to put down your race is kind of unfair, I would say, because as you mentioned that there's certain quotas that have to be met by the government nowadays that says if it's a public school they have to accept X amount of Y minority, and how that can be disadvantages to other minorities that could have this, or other groups that have the same exact test scores and GPAs, but they don't get to go into the college because they had to have a certain required amount of a different group.
See, I kind of disagree though about the demotivation part of it, because you would think in that kind of situation it would make everyone want to work harder, like if that's the example you're using. But I don't necessarily think that minorities are held to a lesser standard. Like colleges, especially like competitive colleges, aren't going to say like, oh well, you're this race so we're going to let you in just because. Like you still have to be competitive at the same level. So I think it would make for more competition. Like there's not a situation where they're like, oh, you're not white, so we're going to accept you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's not just like, oh, well, this person is black, so we'll just kind of throw them in there. It's more like, we're just running out of people, so there's this white person with 4.0 GPA, and then there's this, like, this probably wouldn't happen, this African-American with, like a 3.8 GPA. Let's take this one instead because, helping out. And I think there should also be a better process as far as it, because if you're coming with an area with like not as fortunate education as far as high school goes, it's kind of hard to get a lot of the qualifications because there's not as much caring teachers that will help you with tutoring, and not a lot of times you can meet the standard for what they're looking for because they're just it isn't offered for you the kind of resources that you actually need. And I'm not saying we should just accept everybody willy-nilly because of their race. I'm saying that I think that we should kind of we need more like organizations that kind of help with that kind of stuff, with like reaching out with resources and all that kind of stuff to kind of help people that are not as fortunate kind of be able to get to that same kind of standard.
But that is you kind of assuming that all black people come from unfortunate backgrounds.
That's true.
So what if there's a white person that came from an unfortunate background, that they wouldn't get the same chance as a black person who came from an unfortunate background? So it's kind of like you need to look at more than just the color of their skin.
That's why I want it to be, we should focus on the areas too.
Yeah, I would say just take out the whole racial part altogether and just focus on the student as their activities, as their GPA, as their SAT, ACT scores, and just go with that, not base it on race at all or base it on gender at all, because there's that whole gender side of this whole argument too. Should women be accepted into higher positions of power versus men? It should be that everyone should be seen on the same level equally.
And then again, how you mentioned that they don't have the resources that necessarily more privileged areas do, is that I feel if any student is driven enough, they can achieve their desired GPA. That you can't necessarily blame it on their area for not getting a good GPA. That the student has enough motivation, enough willpower to get their GPA to X, they can do that.
I disagree. I think that the educational system is very well skewed to a certain type of learning. A lot of people have different kind of processes that their brain kind of goes through when they're trying to learn things. For example, when I'm trying to memorize something, I need to be like reading it while listening to it at the same time, which I need to buy audiobooks for all the books that I read because I actually have a reading disability. I can't read like other people can. And so, with that said, I think that some people are just naturally better at school, but that doesn't mean that that they're smarter. It just kind of means that they're different, which is why we need more resources. That's why we need to we need to take account to the people that aren't perfectly fitting into this puzzle piece of an ideal student, which doesn't technically mean that they're smart. It just kind of means that they just happen to fit that,
College is an extension of school, so there's a difference between book smart and just having ability, and it's hard to judge that. We only have tests. I think some people that are really smart and go on to do great things aren't good testers, and it's something that's always really hard to grade. It can affect, you don't have a bad SAT, it can affect where you go to college. But as for accepting people that don't have good test scores, there is resources you can have to help you get there. There are extracurricular things you can do to try to help you get into these desired schools and career paths. And I don't think we need regulations saying that we have to accept a certain group based on that. So we are extending into a somewhat different conversation of the difference between having good tests and book smarts. But I don't think we should have any regulations on it.
At this point, it's now 3:35, so I'm going to ask Liz and Hannah, please. Okay, so before I move on to the next question, do you two have any comments to add to the conversation?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we're sort of missing in this conversation is the fact that we're all coming from this, this being affirmative action from a white privileged point of view. And so we don't have the insight to understand it fully from a minority perspective. And that's something that I really think that we need to take into account when we're approaching this problem, because it doesn't actually affect a lot of this community as much as it does elsewhere. And that can be observed in other forms of majority and minority groups. But I think that's something we need to take into account.
I have to completely agree with that. Coming from a minority, it's different because I am a minority growing up in a privileged setting. So I'm not facing the same struggles as a minority or a majority in the same kind of setting that would require affirmative action. And I do have to agree with Allie's point that you need to work for whatever you're going to get. Nothing should necessarily be handed to you. However, white privilege and majority privilege, depending on where you live, is still very much alive. And we can't necessarily forget that we can't really be colorblind until all people are equal. So I think at the time, while affirmative action is not necessarily a perfect course of action, it is a course of action, and it is pulling people in unfortunate situations out of those situations and putting them into a better situation.
Okay, now moving on to the next question. Should college be free?
Alright, so I'll start this one off with a hard no. Free college, I think, is a ridiculous statement and way too much stress on taxpayers and the people that are going to have to end up paying for this. Now, the difference between free college and a reduced college could be debatable, but for the aspect of straight up free college, I think it's unfeasible to have.
I disagree with the taxpayer stress. I don't technically know whether I want it to be free or not, but let's just say that it would be free. According to the U.S. Department of Education, the cost for having a free college in the U.S. would be $62.6 billion for taxpayers. In 2013, they recorded 242 million taxpayers. And so basically that would cost the average taxpayer about $33 a year. Mind my math, that's wrong. But which is actually completely different from the military budget, which I know that we are slightly ahead as far as, where our country stands according to other countries. We have to protect ourselves. However, the military budget is costing us as taxpayers about $2,483 a year. And if we're putting all of our taxpayer money into war and not college, I feel like that's kind of a big issue, because instead of just spending all this money trying to just like bomb places, we should probably be spending money into figuring out how to find a better way in order to like, you know, find better ways to figure out how we're going to make peace with people, you know? We're hurting a lot of innocent people, and I know that there are bad things happening in other countries, but bombing them is still killing a lot of people that aren't really doing anything wrong.
So to bring it back to the education aspect, you stated how only $33 per person. Meanwhile, that's not true, because all the people that make under $40,000 a year do not pay the same tax amount. They actually have a 0% tax bracket right now. So that means that you have to cut out that 100 million people. And the way that our tax brackets are broken up is that the wealthier would have to pay a higher tax percentage versus the middle class, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm just saying there still is that 100 million below the certain mean that does not have to pay any taxes. And that's going to be the people that the free college is most likely going to be acceptable to.
Well, then, my question for you is, why don't we raise taxes on the wealthy? They certainly can afford to pay for it. And, you know, honestly, I think it's kind of stingy that students come out of college with thousands of dollars in debt and work for most of their life having to pay that off. When, in reality, we have billionaires out there who are just spending their money on frivolous things. You know, we have people in this country, us included, the majority of us are probably going to college, and we're probably going to have to pay student loans. And that's extremely expensive, plus the interest on that. So when you have that much money on you coming out of college, you need to find a job. Okay, you need to pay back those loans on time for your charged fees. And then in addition to that, you know, you still have to try and make a living and survive yourself. So I think, you know, if we can afford it, why not raise taxes on the wealthy? They are the ones who can afford to pay for it. We shouldn't necessarily be putting a tax strain on the middle class, who, you know, are probably the people who have those student loans themselves. Same with the lower class, who can't even afford to pay the taxes that are put on them. That's not necessarily fair to put that strain on those taxpayers. I think, you know, the people who can afford to pay it should be the ones who are paying it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also would like to ask us to consider how education is so essential in getting people out of the poverty trap. And it's the key that makes people able to actually get higher paying jobs. And when the education prices skyrocket like they do now, and it costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars to send yourself to college, you're not actually able to get the education which will further you out of poverty, and that really hurts social mobility. So it just lets the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that hurts the economy overall in the long term.
There was something called the GI Bill after there was George Bush released this after 9/11. If you donate 4 years of your life to the military services, they will pay for your college as much as they can. I want to say it's almost 100%, and I feel like that's a good way to do it, because if we look at other countries that are better off than we are, Israel requires everyone, regardless of gender, to serve a minimum of 2 years. And I'm sure they have the same benefit program set up that they help you pay for college.
I would argue that Israel is actually a very different system. Israel has been in war perpetually since the 60s or earlier, so their motivation with that is very different. While we have a much smaller military, so that probably wouldn't be practical in our economy to send like hundreds of thousands of young people to the military, but similar programs could do a major part in reducing the cost of education.
Not only that, but if you are in the military and we do happen to go into a war, you're risking your life. So I'm not slamming the military. I respect it completely. And, you know, I've thought about going into it myself. However, you're choosing either 4 years in the military and you could potentially die if you are on the ground, or student loans. I don't think that kind of ultimatum is something that we should be forcing on 18, 19-year-olds. I think we need to find a system where, you know, you can choose to either go to college or go to the military and do what you want with your life, not be faced with an ultimatum of having to either go into the military or pay these student loans, unless you are one of the lucky few that can afford to go to college. I think we need to find a system where, you know, we can actually work out how students can pay for college.
Yeah, to build off that, I think education is a right of all people. So I was wondering what you guys would think of that.
I think that also, just to expand on your point about the military, not only are you risking your life and forcing yourself to go out there in incredibly dangerous situations just so that you can pay off your college loans, but it's also like a lot of people aren't physically or mentally capable of being in the military in the first place. And even if it's like one of like the Air Force, for example, you still have to get through boot camp, and a lot of people can't even mentally handle boot camp because of anxiety or just because there's something like it's kind of ableist to say, to be honest with you, because if you're not able-bodied and expecting everybody to go to the military that has student debts, that is just kind of out there. It's kind of radical.
All right. So I'm just going to start off by saying that we shouldn't like degrade the Air Force. They're a very strong force in our nation's protection, that you all have to be physically well, no different than all other aspects of the military. So I'm going to lay out just my plan, if I were Commander-in-Chief. So, having the taxpayers pay for our college is just not the way to go. What I'd do, I'd make college a tax deductibility over a working career. So now, off your income after you get out of college into the workforce, there can be a tax deductible on your student loans, and it'll be based off of the salary you are earning after college. So this now not only encourages someone to go to college, get a good education, get a good job, but it'll also now motivate them to get into the workforce and try hard so that they can get their tax deductibility on their college. So the more money you make, the less tax deductibility there will be. So if you make under $100,000, you'll get X amount. If you make under $40,000, you get all of it deductible. But you know, so this will encourage more people. Another thing you have to drive college prices down is through competition. There's no competition in the college workforce. The process for a college to get a license to be created is very complicated, and there's no way that a small independent college can be made and have a license. So now you get the big schools that have been around for hundreds of years. They're having a monopoly on everyone, and they can keep the prices high. But if we allow more licenses to be given out, they can drive down competition with their lower prices and make college the actual price of what the education experiences is, like the janitorial, teachers, professors, classrooms, rent. So now we're actually getting more to that root cost. And then just to go over to taxing the upper class. So the problem there is that if we were to tax the upper class and make college free, it would be increasing the federal funding by 1/3. And now what's going to happen is when you tax them, they do have the money to pay for free college. If we're talking Bernie Sanders here, they do not have the money to do his entire plan. But when you tax them for the free college and increase it, say, to 75% of their income, what's going to happen is they're going to move the upper class. They have, you know, citizenships in another country. They all have this, so that if this day happens, they're moving out the day that President Bernie Sanders is elected, and now that top 1% gets down to the next 1%, and that keeps lowering down. So then we're having the middle class becoming the upper class, and all of a sudden we don't have the money to pay for it, and the middle class has a tax percentage of 75%. That's all.
Along with getting free college for everyone, is that if we can offer free college for everyone, everyone will guarantee that at least a majority will take advantage of that. And then if the majority take advantage of that, you lose all of those people that would do the people consider like undesirable jobs, like being a plumber, doing trade school stuff that you can get at a much lower cost than an actual full price for your college. That is a desire and a need for America. That we need plumbers, we need auto mechanics, we need people to work at the fast food restaurants, we need all these people that don't require a college degree. You can't rely on your everyday us high school teenagers and the extreme elderly that are already past retirement age to do those jobs.
So I'm gonna reply to that. I think that yes, it's a good thing that if the majority wants to go to college, they can go to college, they can go to four-year schools. However, that's not for everyone. And we have lots of college dropouts. We have a lot of people discovering, hey, I don't want to do this specific thing. I don't want to pursue this type of degree. I want to go, say, trade school. I want to be a chef, or I want to be a hairdresser or a mechanic. I have a cousin who dropped out of high school, and he now owns a racing team. And that was all because he decided he just didn't have an idea of what he wanted to do in college. He already figured what he was going to do. So, I think those undesirable jobs, quote unquote, I think, yes, people still need to do them, but I don't think we should be limiting people's options into that small group because they can't afford to go to college or because they didn't have any other options. There are still people who choose to do those kind of jobs. And if they want to do that job, great, that's good for them. You still have high school students, say, working at like Panera or Chipotle or McDonald's because they just want to make some money on the side. It's not like those jobs are going to disappear. They'll still be available to people. However, if there's somebody who wants to pursue a specific degree, there should not be anything stopping them. And I think that, as someone who's going to be applying to college soon, it's put me in a tough spot where I have to think about, where do I want to go? Okay, how am I going to pay for it? I think that's something that I shouldn't have to be thinking about at 16 years old. How many thousands of dollars do I have to put away in order to get a college education, in order to make money to pay that back later?
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next topic. So I'm going to ask Jake, Paris, Sarah.
Your points were sound.
It wasn't a bad thing.
Just a question though, like based on what you said, like does Europe not have rich people? Because a lot of there's a lot of mostly socialist countries in Europe, and they have plenty of rich people.
The average college rate over there with the 3 colleges, for a 4-year college, it's 6.5 years. The average rate, so now the taxpayers pay for it.
That's not true.
Yes. Germany?
Germany's a 3-year
So
college.
We're actually going to start the war.
Sorry.
I would have a lot to say too. We're not gonna start. Thanks.
Okay, the first question is, should Syrian refugees be allowed into the U.S.?
Yes.
Well, why would you say yes? Like, what's your...
There's no reason that. Okay. So, America is, I guess, hypothetically, one of the greatest countries in the world. That's always been our platform. One of the greatest countries in the world. We make all the promises all day long. We shouldn't not allow people in because, to use what a lot of people say, because they're Muslim, because we don't know who we're letting into the country. Does that make sense?
I understand.
I would like to say, in addition to the morality of letting Syrian refugees into the country, because the minority of Muslims in Syria are actually Sunni Muslims, which is what ISIS is, we also have an obligation from, what someone argue, starting what ISIS actually is, right? Taking out Saddam Hussein, opening the Pandora's box of the Sunni-Shiite conflict, and pretty much essentially creating ISIS, right? They're using our guns, our weapons that we had given that country, all right, using the very people who were oppressed by a dictator who we put in power or helped keep in power at least. We have an obligation to the people who are now suffering from the destruction of this radical group that grew out of the destruction that we left after we killed 750,000 civilians in Syria and Iraq during the war. We have an obligation to those citizens now who are being prosecuted, who are being murdered, who are trying to escape to America to live a better life. We shouldn't discriminate against them just because their religion, one of the largest religions in the world, happens to be that of a radical terrorist group.
I would agree with you, Paris. I would also agree with Sarah that we are like the police of the world. America is looked at the superpower of the world because everyone thinks that America is supposed to fix everything. My opinion is, I don't know why the huge focus is on Syrian refugees. I think we should focus more on the people in America. There's thousands of people on food stamps, there's thousands of people, millions of people actually, in poverty, and there's millions of people out on the streets that don't have jobs.
Well, I don't disagree, and there obviously needs to be a system in place to help them, because in a lot of ways our government has become totally unhelpful. The majority of our lives, our government has been in an absolute standstill. They can't even fix interstate bridges, they can't do anything. Everyone's fighting. Anyway, but that being said, we've been put in this position of responsibility, which started 100 years ago. We no longer in a position where we can just go, never mind, we're done now. Everyone else in the world looks to America, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But we can't just all of a sudden close the doors and be like, you're on your own. Because the fact is, Europe can't take all these people in either, and they have to go somewhere, because it's not fair to leave them there to be massacred.
Yeah, because there are millions of, because I watched this documentary, and there's, all the people in the refugee camps, they came from small businesses, they all have families, and they're all in these tiny little places where they're all crammed in. And, I get, like, it's ridiculous how Donald Trump said, we can't let any Muslims in. I find that absolutely ridiculous. I'm conservative. I'm ashamed to even have him in our party of the Republicans. And to be honest, I agree that all refugees should be let in. And it's ridiculous to say, oh, we should have background checks, because there's so many that are coming in that we can't all have background checks for all of them.
I agree. It's been something that's kind of been part of U.S. politics for a long time, is this xenophobia. This, like, whether it was the Soviets, whether it was the Japanese, now it's the Muslims, there's always this ethnic group, right? We're fighting against this portion of this ethnic group, therefore, they're the devil, they are coming to get you. You need to be scared. It's fear-mongering, and it's used usually for political gain, right? We had a Red Scare during...
He's really good at it.
Exactly.
I think he's not in the race anymore.
You have Fox News on New Year's Eve said ISIS is still out there. They want to destroy America. They want to come for you and your family. They're coming for you. Be scared. This sort of fear-mongering is only perpetuating what ISIS wants. And the problem is that I understand that it's not just ISIS. It's part of a bigger problem. It's part of the radical terrorist groups that grew out of the destabilization of that area. And you can't expect to destroy a radical terrorist group which is fueled by the destruction of the U.S. military with the destruction of the U.S. military. It only fuels their cause, because they'll say, you see that the U.S. is coming in, they're killing people, this is what they do, and it only fuels more hatred. By locking out everyone who's Muslim for getting into the U.S., you do two things. One, people who can't get into the U.S. now hate us because we're discriminating against one of the largest cultures and religions in the world, which might even help turn them to ISIS. Or two, people will just sneak in anyway. Because how can you really check if somebody believes in something or not? It's impossible and unenforceable.
And additionally, I'm sorry, I cut
You
you
can
off.
go, fine.
Additionally, like, you can't look at someone and be like, you look Muslim, therefore you're a terrorist, because A, they may not be Muslim, they may just be from the Middle East, and B, that's so wrong. Like, the fact of the matter is the problem that ISIS is, and Al-Qaeda, and everyone like them, and Hezbollah, it's not just a Middle Eastern problem. Their reach is worldwide. Like, they're not just Muslim, they're not just Arab, they're white, they're Eastern European, they're Western European, they are African, they are everywhere. If you want to discriminate against a group because they may be terrorists and they may want to hurt you, well then that's it, we can't let anyone in, because there's always going to be someone that hates America, and there's always going to be an American that hates America.
Well, with the, I know it's kind of racist to say, but the Muslims are predominantly created in the Middle East, and they're most commonly Middle Eastern men.
Nope.
Especially the ones from Syria, fleeing their country.
That is not true, though.
It's not
The
true
ma-
that
the
Middle
majority-
Eastern people live in Syria.
Yes,
And they're
most.
fleeing their land.
Are you serious?
They're fleeing their land, so they're from the Middle East. Syria is
But
in
that
the
doesn't make them a member of ISIS.
I never said that. I said that.
That is your argument.
Well, let me just clarify your point. So, are you're making the point that the majority of people who live in the Middle East are Muslim?
Yes,
Which is
and
true.
Muslim. And
Right, okay.
ISIS started off as a break-off from Al-Qaeda, which they are a break-off from a small sector of the Islam religion. I'm not saying they are Islam, I'm saying they're a small sector that corrupted the Quran. They use the Quran as the killing, which is the book from Muslim, from Islam.
It's actually not just the Quran, it's the Hadith. The Hadith
Yep.
is actually responsible for the majority of misconceptions people have about Islam. See, first you have the Quran, which is the Word of God. It's the unadulterated Word of God that is written down in this book, as dictated by Muhammad. Then you have the Hadith, and the Hadith is not the Word of God. It's the telling of Muhammad's life from other people's
It's
perspectives.
like a middle school lunchroom. It's like my
Essentially.
cousin told me that his friend heard from this guy in a coffee shop that Muhammad may or may not have said this, but we're
It's-
going to believe it anyway.
It's essentially gossip, really. Well, where a lot of it comes from. That's where the 72 virgins misconception comes from. That's where even a lot of the misogyny against women, which is more cultural than in Islam, comes from. Just to correct you.
So still, that book is a part, not saying it's the book that all believe it, but still that book comes from a part of the religion, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So then what is so wrong with saying that because they believe in that book, because that book is part of the religion, it's saying that it's not that religion, that
Thing is-
because the terrorists, so you're saying the terrorists aren't Islam?
They aren't. That's the thing, though. The what ISIS believes in is totally separate from Islam.
It's more
The-
radical.
They kill
It's-
Muslims.
They kill their.
They do.
That is
They literally
against
kill
the.
their own
It's
Because you
against the
have-
Quran. It is against the Hadiths, and neither of those religious texts does it go. It is okay to kill another Muslim. It's quite the opposite. What they believe in is a holy war. They say that the pillars of faith that define Islam, that is the entire Quran, that is everything it's been based off of, is less important than a holy war. You can't claim yourself to be a Muslim and believe those things as well.
Look here, all right. So first you have Saddam Hussein, right? So there, you know that there's like two different essentially two different sects of Muslim, Shiites and Sunnis, right? And they've just this division has caused war for thousands of years. So Saddam Hussein was Shiite, and he was a dictator, and he was oppressive, and he was a horrible, horrible leader, and we supported him because we needed their oil and blah blah blah. Usual U.S. Subversive looking out for ourselves economic. Now, right? We suddenly go in, take out Saddam Hussein, who we had supported in the past. Some would argue for the oil, right? We destabilize the region. We take out their leader. Now, all of the Sunnis who had been oppressed by the Shiites, you have these radical groups coming up. Because now that the Shiite leader, who had been oppressing everybody, is gone, you have the Sunnis wanting revenge on the Shiites. And so you have just a big mess. So that's where Al-Qaeda came from, and that's where the Taliban came from, that's where ISIS came from. They're all just offshoots of this same problem. So right now, ISIS kills more Muslims than any other group right now. They kill thousands of fellow Syrians and fellow Iraqis and fellow Muslims. It's not only the West and Christianity and the Judeo-Christian faith that they're going after.
Indonesia has the largest population of Muslims in the world, but no one's sitting here and going, we shouldn't let them in. And it's not just the Middle East that houses radical Muslims. They're everywhere, and it's not just radical Muslims that hate Western ideals. Fundamentalist fundamentalist Muslims can hate Western ideals too. A regular Muslim person can hate Western ideals as well. You can't pin everyone as this radical group from Syria or Iraq or wherever they may be from. It's not fair. So unless we're going to say all Muslims from everywhere in the world aren't allowed in, we have no right to say that these people that are being slaughtered in Syria and being sold fake life jackets by their government, so they're forced to drown while trying to escape to Europe, are no longer welcomed in because our country, which is founded on equality, decided that somehow they are not equal enough, or whatever it may be, or white enough, or Christian enough to be let in.
So what do you propose we do to ensure that we aren't letting in this group of radicals? How do you propose that we allow all of this mass number of them coming out at once, not because that's the idea right now.
It's already happened in Texas and California. There's been ISIS.
think the misconception is that the people that are coming support ISIS. If you're running from Syria, odds are it's because they were going to kill you.
Yeah, but ISIS said that they're going to insert ISIS people in
And
there.
the problem is that if ISIS wants someone to come to the U.S., they're going to get here. We are not impenetrable. How do you think all of these Mexicans cross the border no matter how much security we do or do not place or whatever wall we will or will not build? If someone wants to come to America, it's going to be done. That's it. If someone wants to buy drugs or an assault rifle or whatever it may be, they're going to find it. If ISIS wants people here to hurt us, it doesn't matter what we do, they will come.
And if somebody gets in, right, legally, an immigrant gets in, and then turns out to be an ISIS sleeper cell and causes some sort of terrorist act, at least they're on record. We can see where they came from, who they're associated with, where they said they came from. We have information on them. As opposed to if we just lock everybody out and somebody sneaks in and does this, we have nothing.
I think if the refugees do come in, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think Barack Obama let like 25,000 of the refugees. So he let a couple of them come in, but I don't know the absolute number. But I think if they do come in, we need to have a plan for them to be able to actually live in America, like a plan for insurance, for housing, for food. So then, because these people are coming over with everything that they had, which isn't too much because they lost it when they were put into these refugee camps. So we need to set them up with a plan with healthcare, education, so they feel comfortable. And I mean, it's gonna take a little bit because they're gonna have to get used to the American culture, but we need to understand that these are people just like us, and we need to understand that we need to help them out of this misery that they've had in Syria with these man-slaughtering idiots.
Yes.
That they call each other ISIS, and we need to help these people if they're ISIS members or not. I mean, I hate to say it, we need to help these people.
All right, well,
I agree with
I got
that
nothing else to say,
Just
so.
I'll say one more idea. This one more idea is that I think opening the borders and letting them all come in in mass numbers is a
Oh my
bad
God,
idea.
no, I don't think that's a good idea either.
No one's saying that.
I never thought that we should just pile everyone onto a boat and then release them into Washington D.C. Like, that's a terrible
Let's do
idea.
it.
Joe's
Yeah.
thinking, I know what that makes more of a fear of, because we've seen it in the past, is they're using the younger child soldiers and they're even convincing women to come to their ideas. That it's not as easy as to lock out only women and children can come in nowadays. Which I fear, and how Paris said that we can track them back as to where they said they came from, and that's what the big fear is. They can come up with false information because there's no record of from where they fled to.
Okay.
Is that better than knowing nothing? The person is...
We can, look, here's what I'd be in favor of, right? If you have more regulations and make it, more records and make it more of a process for people coming from Syria and from that area, I'd be in favor of that. I'd be in favor of extra thorough background checks for anyone who has any relation to anywhere in the Mideast, which is fine because people who are innocent will get in. People who people who might sneak in, even if they do something, right? At least we might have like DNA on them, and we might know where they came from and who they're related with, and everything like that, which is better than what Sarah said. It's better than nothing. It's better than, saying no Muslims can come in, and then ISIS somehow finds a way to sneak people in, and then they commit a crime, and we have no leads to get them.
Okay, so going off of that background checking idea,
I actually
do you
have to
think
head
that
out
in a
real quick.
non-refugee setting, passenger profiling is justified?
To an extent.
It's hard to do this one without being racist, I want to say. So we have to talk about that being the main issue here, is judging someone off their race because of the history that's been with America, especially through TSA and airplanes, is that it's hard for us not to be racist talking about it when we see that 9/11 we all know is done by Al-Qaeda, and the sense of the media's blown up a portion of that. Al-Qaeda is part of the Muslim religion. Al-Qaeda is from Islam, that we have to fear that idea of that all Muslims are terrorists. Just the media's over display, I feel, is like the biggest issue with it.
I guess the thing is that the people that are in charge of passenger profiling, because whether we want to admit it or not, it happens, and we all know it does. The people that end up doing that don't necessarily know what they're looking at. They're like, you kind of look what I think like an Arab looks like, and you're wearing a turban even though you're a Sikh and you're from northern India. We're going to question you. Like, there's no way of putting those people, like, they don't necessarily know what they're looking at, and that's how we become that's how everyone thinks we're racist. Because they're just trying their best, because they are trying to protect us, they just don't know.
It's tough, because, I mean, the majority of, ISIS members are Arabic. The majority of, terrorist attacks against the U.S. Have been, Islamic extremist based. So there inherently is some racial prejudice in insecurity, particularly in airports, because, I mean, naturally there has to be. But the problem is it's that ISIS is like Sarah made the point before. It's more than just brown people now, right? You can't just say, oh, a person's wearing a turban, they must be ISIS, right? It's not just exclusively people from the Mideast. They're reaching out. There are people from the West coming over, right? People from the U.S., people from Europe, people from Australia, all over the world. So it's I think it's becoming relatively less so, which is almost bad in a way.
Oh yeah.
Because now,
It's harder.
it's harder.
So I think a way we could propose this for a new version of passenger profiling is looking at your recent fly history. If you see that they have flown to any country with known ties to high terrorist activity, is that you have to put them on, like, not a no-fly list necessarily, but on a double careful watch list that you have to question them again when they first get on the airplane. And if you guys haven't heard, like, Adam Roots, everything like that did from True TV, is that he has one on the TSA, and it pretty much says that the TSA is useless. And it's kind of true, is that the TSA can only catch the obvious. We pretty much show the terrorists, this is how we know to catch you, find the loophole.
Yep.
So we have to wait for that loophole to come up before we can protect that loophole. So pretty much it protects against people bringing obvious weapons, like knives, guns, and a lot of times it's even like toy replicas, like a pen, like a grenade that's got a pen inside of it, or a sword that's like a cap pen instead of something else that's an actual weapon.
So it kind of seems like we're all on the same page about passenger profiling.
I guess the only part that's unfortunate is, like, to say you think that it's right makes you look like a racist.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels
But it's
morally
not.
wrong.
You're just like,
But you
shouldn't.
we
but
need to
you
do
have
it. Yeah, we
and-
have to do it for our safety. And I think that's one of the main things, is that one of the main things we need to do as a country is focus on keeping our people safe first, instead of either extending out to the rest of the world or anything else like that. We need to focus on fixing the issues we have at home, and then spread out, and then maybe accept other people from other countries. Maybe screen them better so they know what they're going through and like who they are when they come here. But we need to work on the issues we have here first before we start fighting battles and fighting people from across the world.
And I agree with that.
I know you're not like super with me.
Not super with you
Yeah.
there, but the first part I agree with.
I feel like this can branch out into a lot of different subjects. But I agree with that. I think what I don't appreciate is just all of the fear mongering around the xenophobia of Muslims coming to get you, really only for political gain, right? You have people like, Donald Trump, saying Mexican immigrants, they're rapists, they're killers, they're the reason why the drugs are here. The Muslims, they're potentially terrorists, they're coming to get you. And really what it does is it just encourages, people tend to be a lot more loyal and tend to be a lot more influenced when they're scared of, when there's a devil to be afraid of.
Right. So I just kind of wanted to throw this thing. I was reading the description that Megan had typed up for us, and it says based on appearance, behavior, and personal information. Like I feel like I want to kind of steer up to the behavior specific one. Do you think it would be necessarily wrong to use animals? Like we know how animals have such a higher amount of sensitivity. I've read articles about how they use even like gerbils and hamsters to detect people from being afraid, whether it's first time flying, or that they actually are afraid they're going to get caught. What do you guys think about using animals as judges of character and pulling a person aside?
I think that in a lot of ways there's plenty of ways that we could screen people, whether that's animals or whether it's the weird air thing that like they shoot at you to see if there's stuff hidden under your clothes. That's weird, but I think a lot of times people are like, we can't do that because it looks stupid. Like when it first, like the full body X-ray first came out, people freaked out because they're like, they can see under my clothes, and I was like, no, they can't see under your clothes. It's still an X-ray machine. But people flipped out, and the TSA literally thought for a time that they were just like not going to implement the full body X-rays, despite the fact that they were helpful. We think, we're not quite sure still. We let, I guess, people's thoughts on an issue cloud how effective it may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many ways to screen a person coming in, and I think people immediately exclude it just because they're like, that's ridiculous, or people are like, no, you're invading my personal privacy.
That being said, I think we should do it, definitely.
Just to expand on the conversation, do you think that you should screen only certain people and single those people out the screen, or screen everyone?
Everyone.
I think
Everyone should be screened to some extent, but there should be more thorough screening for people who
Or on a watch list.
Yeah, people who are more likely, because of their travel history,
I think the way that since the Middle East easiest possible way is looking at their travel history and their physical, not appearance, but like demeanor.
Yeah.
If they're shaking, if they're sweating, if they give us some indication that they are nervous, I think that's a justified need to pull them aside and say, like, what's up? Like, is it just first time flying, or if it's an actual fear of getting caught that
But
they
then
could
the
bomb?
issue with that is it's all subjective to
Yeah.
the person looking at them, which makes it completely up to personal
no
opinion.
other way to do it.
I would like to address that point you made about animals. I don't really know any information about animals and how effective they are at sensing people's emotions and such, but it seems dubious to me, and it seems like it just add more subjectivity to it. Also, about the what do you call it? I don't know. It was X-ray machine.
Yeah.
I can understand where people were coming from with that, because one, you're exposing people to radiation because of the X-rays, and it is an invasion of privacy, and I can see why people wouldn't want to have to go through that just to travel.
And I guess that moves into the conversation of how much liberty do we need to give up to keep ourselves safe, hopefully.
Can I bring up something that I don't think really was mentioned as much as it probably should have been? I guess the problem with racial profiling stuff is just that kind of white people shoot up stuff too. I feel like that is
about to talk about that. I'm not kidding. I
Yeah.
was just about to bring it up.
Because, I mean, like, we can, like, look at somebody and be like, oh, well, you know, they kind of look like a terrorist, and, I know this is mentioned before, but, like, I mean, and back to the Syrian refugee thing, it's like, not letting in somebody because they could be, like, a terrorist just because they're from Syria is like saying, I don't think white men should be able to go to theaters and schools because they shoot them up sometimes. It's kind of just, like, really random. And not only that, but the problem with, like, basing people off of race is just the fact that, like, you're kind of dehumanizing them in a way because we're all human. We all have souls, and we're not really that much affected as souls and as people, so we all should be responsible for our actions. We can't tell, I'm sorry, but there's no way to tell whether or not somebody has a bad or a good agenda. And yes, it's an issue. I don't have an answer for you guys.
It's really hard to sit here as a white, privileged female and be like, yeah, Muslims, we can pull them aside and question them because that just seems so wrong. But, like, at the same time, there's only so much you can do. And you can't just be like, well, we're not going to do anything, and then have someone else repeat 9/11. But you also don't want to be stuck in that position where we exclude everyone except, like, we pull aside everyone but the white people, because we've all seen how, like, clearly we have our own problems. Like,
So the issue with that is that people get their persona, they become who they are based off what happened in past. And from past, the major airline incidences happened from people of Arab descent. So that's where the racial part comes in, and the fear is that we're not going to ever get it out of our minds until a white person does this, that we have to pull them aside. Or that a African American or a black person does this, that we have to pull them aside for airplanes. That issue is that we have to wait for something to happen to start being a racial justice against that. And like Molly said about the white man shooting up the school, as horrible as to say, is that a big percentage of it comes down is to numbers, is that the Arab, like 9/11 attack had such a mass body count, is that we have way more fear of something like that happening again than somebody, a mentally deranged male, going into a school.
How come you get to call a white male mentally deranged because they shot up a school, but they're just terrorists or they're just Islamic if they, go and do something terrorist attack?
because being a radical doesn't make you mentally deranged, much like shooting up a school doesn't make you mentally deranged. Those two things are not necessarily connected.
Not only that, but I'm offended because I have mental illnesses. I'm pretty sure I have psychosis, and that doesn't make me a bad person that shoots up things.
But you said everyone should be responsible for their own.
Exactly. And you can't
No, but you can't give people responsibility over their own selves if they don't know who they are. It's like telling teenagers not to drink. They're gonna drink because they don't know that it's bad yet. You can't tell people what's right and what's wrong, and you can't let them decide
How
for
can we get to
themselves.
blame all Muslims?
But the thing is that there's a social issue that exists in Middle Eastern countries. You could call it the narrative, you could call it a cosmic war, you could call it whatever the hell you want. The problem is that manifestation exists there. That the people that participate in terrorist acts against their own people, against America, against people in Paris or Berlin or Australia or whatever it may be, it exists. And it's not necessarily because they're Muslim, and they may be a convert to an Islam that we don't acknowledge as an outside force to be Islam, but the problem exists. And you can't look upon the situation and go, well, we can ignore it because we have to ignore it because they're Muslim, or we have to ignore it because they're this, or we have to ignore it because they're that. The problem exists, and they exist as a participant in this cosmic war on a different plane than the rest of us do. They say, we're a fighter for God, I'm right, you're wrong, if you're not with me, you're against me, I'm going to kill you. And we have to protect ourselves from that. And it's wrong because we do have to look upon all Muslims and go, maybe you want to kill me because I'm white, but at the same time, we also have to be informed in the sense that they're probably not a terrorist because they're one of the biggest religious groups in the world. It's so complicated. There's no one answer, but it's not like anyone here is going, your Muslims are a terrorist. you can't paint it as one thing and you can't paint it as the other, but to sit there and go, I'm offended, isn't right either.
Here's what I agree with. I absolutely believe. I think we're all on the same page that, like, you know, a few people doing an atrocious act shouldn't be representative of their entire ethnic,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
ethnicity or anything like that, right? I mean, for example, like, right, we've had a mass shooting for like every day this year,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want this to turn into like a gun debate, but the thing is that we have more violence going on in the U.S. by predominantly white males than we do actual Islamic terrorist attacks. And I think
Exactly.
because there's such a because there's such a saturation of it in the media of ISIS and this and that, because they want views and they want ratings, they want people to be scared, so they watch the news. We tend to think that it's not that it's a bigger threat than it is, because, well, yeah, essentially that it's much bigger than it is, and we forget that. Like, this point was brought up before as well, that maybe if we focus more on what's going on inside of our country,
Thank
right?
you, Paris.
Invest less money in our military. By the way, we have, you know, I think everyone knows that statistic, that we have more military spending than the next 10 countries combined on the list.
54% of our taxes go towards military.
Exactly. If we just took some of that out and invested it towards actual beneficial regulations and reform within our country to prevent things that are already inside, instead of worrying about everything that's outside, I think that's where the real focus needs to be.
Now, some things to consider. So a lot about your proposal to screen the travel history. I see how that could be a good plan, but do you guys feel that that is not subjective? Because who's to say that one's travel history is suspicious? How does that become
Good question,
objective?
Megan.
And I don't.
The way to respond to that is, again, sounding racist, is that you have to look at countries with high terrorist connections. Because we know that every single country nowadays in modern world history has at least one member that's a terrorist. We know that there are Americans that are part of Al Qaeda and ISIS. We know there are Europeans that are part of that. There are Asians that are part of different terrorist groups.
They're American.
Right.
White Americans that
Right.
are Muslim and are terrorists
The
too.
thing that we have to look at is that their travel history is the ones that have above a certain percentage. We know that ISIS is in. We know the area that they majorly control. And if you've visited an airport or traveled to an airport that the government can presume is close enough within proximity of ISIS's borders, I feel like that's the border of what you go to, is to double check. I'm not saying put them on a no-fly list, but you have to double check them. Not necessarily harass them with questions, but you have to definitely question them and ask, why were you in an area that's so close to ISIS?
Now, it is my understanding that you can no longer fly into Mosul, Iraq.
That sounds
That
Right.
sounds, everyone agrees with
Yeah.
that?
I would
Okay.
believe that.
Okay, so at least from the United States, you cannot.
correct.
If I was looking at someone's travel history, no name, no picture, I don't know what religion they are, and they flew into Mosul, Iraq before ISIS took over in 2014 6 times, I'm going to go, maybe I should pull them out. Maybe I should look at them again. I think the part that's missing in this plan is that there shouldn't be any names when we look at that. There should be no pictures. There's no gender. There's nothing like that. We go, person A that's flown to Texas. They're probably fine. The person here that's flown to Israel 9 times, maybe we look at them again, because it's quite easy to go from one to the other to the other. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right.
The problem is that no one's going to want to pull apart
A
John Doe from middle of nowhere, Ohio, and go, why have you been flying to the Middle East so much? Why are you spending so much time in Saudi Arabia? Like,
Agreed.
The basic issue with how you said the name is that they're not going to pull across. They're not going to pull out a John, a Jane, a common white name. But if they see something like Muhammad that's commonly tied towards an Arabic name, they're going to pull him aside no matter what, because they're like, oh, we think that all Arabs are terrorists.
I guess
And that's
that-
the issue with our TSA system, I want to say.
And I think here's what we know, right? We know, like, they're the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. They're based in the Middle East. They're based in Iraq and Syria. Everybody from other Western countries who have, you know, they have, in order to have become part of their militia, they have to have gone there, and they were trained, and they went back to their respective countries and did whatever they did. So we need, at the same time, if anybody who has a connection to there, because that's a common thread between most of these ISIS agents, is that they have some sort of connection to Iraq or Syria or Middle Eastern country, and they happen to be Muslim.
But that's still subjective. Like, that's the issue. It's still subjective. There's no way that we're going to reach something that's objective.
No, absolutely. And well, all right. I've been to Israel 3 times, and they have.
Sorry.
No, because like for example, like we went to see Petra the first time, which is in Jordan. So, and that was like.
You got into Jordan?
We got into Jordan. It's literally 4 hours on either side going through passports to get Jordan out. Here's how the Israeli background check works. Their conversation. They ask you about it. It's not like official, like where are you going, blah blah blah. They ask you, and they like ask you about yourself and everything, and they'll be like, oh, you went to Jordan, how was that? And they make it conversational, but they're actually getting information out of you, right? Like for example, my dad was on last time we were there, like they were talking, and my dad's like been here before. It's like, oh yeah, I spent some time here in college on a kibbutz. Oh, kibbutz, what kibbutz? He says he speaks in Hebrew. It's like, yeah, I know a little bit of Hebrew, and like the more like they ask, they're sort of like subliminally finding out more and more about each person. I don't know if that helps, but it's certainly a tactic that I think might help.
How long's that take?
How long does it? Well, it depends,
Right.
Like, have you guys, obviously you've been out of the country. Have you guys been out of the country?
Yeah.
You've gone through coming back to America, right?
Right. It's a hassle.
They check you out. It isn't, it isn't. Like, it's a hassle, but when you actually come to talking to someone, they're like, what's your name? Where'd you go? How long were you there? And sometimes they don't even ask you that. Like me, like coming back from Cuba and from Mexico, like they look at me, I'm a little white girl, like my parents sent me ahead. They asked me what my name was, and they were like, okay, go on your way. The likelihood they would have done the same thing for someone else is low, but at the same time, like there's a separate problem because I can still be a member of ISIS despite the fact that I'm white, because I may not be a Muslim convert, but I'm pretty much on my way there. Like, that there's something that's
trying to
missing.
tell us something?
Not part of ISIL.
So I think the proposal, it's kind of an idea of to help prevent against future terrorist attacks is, what would you guys think about if we made burner phones or like phone cards that you buy them with reusable cards, like the best way to label is burner phones to be legal and only allow phones that are on a set like AT&T, Verizon. But the only I guess is
I guess the problem is that it doesn't matter what you make illegal. Like you guys, I'm assuming everyone knows what the darknet is.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just written in a separate code. You know what the code is. Basically, essentially, it's the black market of the internet. If you want to buy a kid, you can buy a kid. If you want to buy 12,000 burner phones, you can buy 12,000 burner phones. And there's no regulation on that. And you can't regulate everything. So New Hampshire can say, or the entire United States can say, all right, we're banning guns. No more guns. We're banning burner phones. We're banning this. Go to Canada. Drive across the border to Mexico. Like, have it flown in by Amazon helicopter, which exists, by the way. Like, if someone wants something, they're going to get it. And I think that's like the argument that people fail to acknowledge when it comes to guns or drugs or whatever it may be. Like, yes, burner phones often are used to blow up a bomb, but it's not necessary. And in fact, the bombs that don't need a burner phone to blow them up are actually more dangerous.
And I'd say I find it interesting that the argument against gun regulations is, oh, well, bad guys are just going to get guns anyway.
We talked about guns now?
No, I'm not. I don't want to.
First, don't bring that in.
Oh god, that is a whole new
But many times the same people who say that, when it comes to immigration, it's like, oh, we got to stop them, we got to put a wall, we got to do this and that. And I just find
They can just
that
swim across where they can make a boat. Get in so many other ways.
That's why you should let them in, but only have good screening processes. So you make sure when they come in that they're good.
This is weird because, like,
having watched all of the debates, this seems like a more intelligent
Yeah,
conversation
literally.
than anyone that's running for president.
Well, it's because they're all so stuck in their ways, they're not willing to
They're not willing
budge
to
at
see
all.
it.
They're
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
just, it's because they're pandering to constituents.
And we're also still learning. I mean, because you and I've even had some of my points be like, wow, I never thought about that. I need to reconsider some of my stuff. And that's why I think that this kind of debate is a lot more productive than like an official political debate like
Yeah.
we see on TV. Because the thing is that the thing about these kind of subjects and these kind of debates is the fact that there really is no right answer. I'll be honest with you. That's the reason why there is an argument.
But the problem is people feel more secure in somebody who has a straightforward answer, somebody who has a belief and who's just
Exactly.
like, so that's why you don't see any of them up there
I
saying
find
like
this
there's no right answer.
So interesting because you're so right. Having listened to Donald Trump speak, which was the weirdest experience of my life, he has nothing actual to say, but everyone there was like, I am so convinced that he's going to be able to keep us safe. Except you're not.
That seems to be another like one of the common stipulations here that Donald Trump is the political Satan incarnate. That seems to be.
Right.
Well, I
that
mean,
seems to be like,
for a raging liberal, the answer is yes, he is. So, like, I guess, but it's not just Donald Trump. Whether that be Republican or Democrats who say this is how we're going to fix things, this is the answer, I'm right. People seem to be, like Paris said, more comfortable with that, and it's so weird because half the time they're so blind to what the actual occurrence is.
They're so blind to the possible, not outcomes, but like the loopholes in the system. Like especially, I'm moderately conservative, and like I see these right-wing extremist ideas as, like, what the hell are they thinking? They're just gonna make it harder to get in the long run. Like Donald Trump saying, I'm gonna build a wall. I'm like, all right, yeah, that works. They're gonna build the wall. They're not gonna get across from that section. There's so many other ways.
Literally.
There's so many
Oh my
other
God,
ways
don't
around
get
it.
me started.
Guys,
Okay.
guys, on this productive note, I'm just going to end the debate.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
how much over this we go?
You can still debate if you want, you know.
You guys
Can I also say that like George Washington didn't want us to make political parties, and I think that political
Literally
parties
all of the forefathers were like, do you want to know what sucks?
Yeah,
I think this party is
Well,
literally
literally,
now.
literally,
That's-
and
that's
like as an independent on the left side,
How many people can run
I'm on the
for it?
left side,
You don't want to have
but there was like 30